Cool. So in this talk, want to just kind of share the journey of GrowthMentor and want to share it from the lens of a non-technical founder who started a tech startup, because I know that can seem very daunting to people. Like, how do I do a tech startup if I don't know how to code? So having gone through that, I thought that would be pretty cool to kind of have it with that perspective. So a bit about what we're going to talk about. The agenda is right here in front of you. So, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's just jump right into it, right? So let's just first preface this by saying I don't know how to code. I know system administration a bit, but I'm a marketer, right? So I know that quite well. I've been head of growth at a hosting company for the past 12 years. And through that journey of being a marketer, I've faced a lot of different roadblocks, and ultimately that kind of gave me the idea, which was spawned from my own problem, right? So my problem, which I tried to solve with GrowthMentor, was that I had too many decisions that I had to make, strategic ones and also tactical and operational ones, but I didn't really have a 100% confidence with everything that I was doing. I had a lot of indecision and a little bit of imposter syndrome as well. Like, maybe I should defer to an expert, or maybe I should hire an agency for this, for PPC or SEO or whatever it was. And I didn't really have anybody on my team internally that I could bounce ideas off of at a high enough level for my satisfaction. So I got lonely a lot, like professionally. So there were some sleepless nights, not really sure exactly if I was doing the right thing. And that was my personal problem. And I couldn't solve that with any ways that I knew. So like, I was thinking of outside of the box ways to solve that. And one of them was hiring people on Upwork instead of like doing the thing for me. I would hire them to just talk to them. Like, let's say I was launching a new campaign using a PPC platform that I didn't have experience in, because like big money was at stake. I wasn't really sure if I was setting it up correctly. I would just book a $80 an hour call with someone from Upwork, a freelancer, because I know they do this like all the time. I was like, who better to get advice from them, from a doer, somebody that's actually doing it, right? So I would just talk to them and do a screen share kind of like this. And if I was doing it right, they'd tell me, and that would give me that sort of validation, like, yo, just keep going, you got it, right? Or if they're saying, hey, you missed this thing, or check out this setting, or your targeting's off, I'd fix it, and that would be awesome because I get better. But that was really annoying to have to like do that from Upwork. So I figured, hey, maybe there's an opportunity over here to make it easier to jump on calls with super high level growth marketers and just get another opinion. But just want to show this little quote over here. Sorry about that, but it's the video. It's not about ideas, it's about making ideas happen. I love this quote. Ideas, they're super easy to come up with, and many of them are great, but I mean, unless you actually execute, it's completely worthless. And for a year and a half, I had this idea of GrowthMentor, and I did absolutely nothing because I was super scared. I was like, I can't do this. I'm not a coder. Like, how am I going to beat Clarity.fm, which is another huge player in the space? So I just didn't do anything. Of course, I would talk about that idea with my friends and stuff, and they were like, yeah, that's awesome, but that's about it. But then one day, over a couple of beers, finally decided, all right, we got this. Let's actually do this. And I'm not a coder, but I'm sure I can find a way, right? There's always a way. It's just like, how hard do you want to look to find that way? It's just, that's part of like having a growth mindset, really believing that there is a way. It's just up to you to kind of figure out how much effort you want to put into figuring it out. So step one, now we're getting into a bit of the nitty gritty, is begin with what I call the MVV. So the minimum viable visualization. So this is really step one of any sort of idea. Whenever I talk to startup founders on GrowthMentor calls and they tell me about their ideas, I'm like, well, do you have a wireframe or something? Like, do you have something to show? And probably 50% of the time they're like, no. I'm like, well, do it, and come back. I want to see it. When you put something on paper, like it becomes real at some point, like you internally manifest it. Like it's part of visioning. And it's really not that hard to do. Like as you can see, my first wireframe was done on Google Docs. It's actually the first one was done on paper, and that's the actual first like visual thing of GrowthMentor right there on paper and pencil. I think that was. And if you don't know how to like prototype on a wireframe, it's not that hard. Just Google it and read some blog posts on it. It's going to make your life so much easier to just be able to visually show people what your idea is, what you're working on. Well, let's fast forward because paper and pencil can only take you so far, right? At some point, you need to get digital with your idea, and what we did is we made a pre-MVP. All right, so I really like this strategy if you're a non-tech founder and you don't really have funding or you don't have any money to screw around and build out something proper. What you can do is invest some money in like a really nice design and make like a dummy landing page, like as a teaser to see if you can get some early adopters to enter their email address to get notified when you launch. Like even if you don't ever launch your product, like this is still okay. Like if you have the idea, you're thinking about doing it, but you're not sure if you're going to do it, this is a great way forward. And there's loads of ways you can build a landing page really easily and cheaply. There's a tool called Unbounce, which I use now, but back then I didn't. The way we did it over here was a custom design, and then we did a sketch to HTML splicing, and we just put it in a Twitter Bootstrap, and just put the site up, just one simple HTML file, and we had a button that said request early access, and when they clicked that, they would then get prompted to leave their email address, and we would collect leads. So what I did to get those early leads is I put $500 in AdWords budget, and I bid on the keywords GrowthMentor, business mentors, and I got like a $5 cost per leads, which was really good. I had a pretty sweet conversion rate, like 18% on Google Ads, which kind of told me that my messaging was on point and gave me that extra sort of validation to push forward. And then the next thing that happens after you get these leads is you want to get as much data as possible from these early adopters who they know that there's no product behind it, but they're just kind of interested to see where you're going with this. And by the way, if you don't want to spend any money on Google Ads, you can go on Reddit, you can go on Indie Hackers, or any sort of community where your ideal customer persona lives, and just promote it in a very non-spammy kind of way. And there's loads about how to do that, but just basically get the landing page out there and try and get at least a couple hundred email addresses, and then funnel them through some sort of a survey to get data from them, right? So that's what I did over here. And this slide here is going to be about how to turn that data into actual insights that you can then analyze to discern whether your idea is validated or not. Because one of the things that founders tend to, I guess, miscalculate is how strong our confirmation bias is. So I thought my pain point was really strong, and I was positive I had it, but I wasn't really sure if everyone else had that same pain point. But by looking through the survey results over here, you can see here, like what I did is I tagged them based on different similarities and patterns. So these three different results here all mention confidence as an issue, right? So I doubts to my idea, I don't have clear direction, decisiveness. A lot of people were talking about indecisiveness, which really echoed what my core pain point was when I first had the idea to create this solution to a problem which I I had, but I wasn't sure if anyone else really did. Turns out a lot of people in growth are just as indecisive and imposter syndrome as I am, because there's just so much you have to do, right? Like growth marketers have to worry about SEO, PPC, products. It just, the list goes on, and it can get pretty stressful. So fast forwards, after I was satisfied that the idea was validated, and took around like a month for me to be like, all right, I'm gonna do this. Like I'm all in. I decided to reach out to a mutual friend who was a Ruby on Rails developer who had an agency in Poland. And I told him my idea, right? And I'm like, look, I want to build a platform where you essentially can book one person to the next for calls. There's a calendar system, and then like you can leave a review for them, and you can filter based on these things. And how much is it going to cost? Like how long is it going to take? Again, remember, like I'm not a developer, so this is all completely alien to me. And he's like, look, man, like I can't tell you this by just hearing like you need to come with something a little bit stronger than that, right? So I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? I'm going to give him exactly what he wants and then some. So what I did is I made full clickable prototypes of the application. I put it on InVision, which is a tool where you can upload design files to, and then you can set little waypoints and clickers, and you can effectively simulate a fully working app without drawing a line, putting a line of code, right? It's just a bunch of images stitched together, basically. So how the whole process began is I just made a big Google sheet of all other platforms that offered similar functionality to what we wanted to have on our platform. And I'll just be honest, like I just took the best bits of all the different platforms, things that I liked, and I left the things I didn't. And I just went on a Google Doc, and I kind of wireframed it super just semantically, saying, and then I gave that to my product designer, which was working with me at EuroVPS, where I ran growth at. And we were kind of doing this on the side. It took us around a month to build out all the designs for this. And we just made like full one-to-one designs, every single screen. And we delivered it to Maciek, who is the CEO of Ragnarsson, that Ruby on Rails agency. And he's like, okay, now we're talking. And with that, we were able to spec out exactly everything. And he gave me the quote, and he's like, look, this is probably going to cost 1.5 to 2 times more than what I'm going to quote you. I just want you to like be cool with that, right? Just so there's no surprises. I'm like, whatever. All right, let's go for it. And at that point, like I knew that this was going to be expensive, and it was going to eat up every last bit of my savings that I had amassed in my 30 years of life up at that point. But I was at that point considering buying a car. And it was a car that I'd been salivating over for years, BMW 335 convertible. And I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna not do that and keep my piece of crap burner that I had from '98, and just all that money I was gonna spend on that, I'm just gonna put it in this. If it doesn't work, whatever. I mean, I would have lost that money on depreciation. So like I play these sort of like mental gymnastics with myself to kind of be okay with the prospect that I'm going to lose every single dollar that I'm going to invest in this. But I got one tip: if you're a non-technical founder and you're thinking about building products, just know that if you go to an agency, they're not product managers. Or I mean, if they do the product management, that's going to cost you probably 50% more. So you can save so much money by doing the product management yourself. And what product management means essentially is just making sure that feature creep is kept to a minimum, like not too much stuff coming up that's not really necessary for an MVP, and making sure that you're very clear with what you're delivering, like what you want done, and having the design like exactly what the developers are going to be building, and be very, very clear about what user stories are for both sides of, well, I mean, I don't know if you're going to make a marketplace or not, but for us, we essentially had to build two products, right? So one for the mentors and one for the mentees. And there's a user story for each side. So every single feature that you ask for your developers to build, make sure that you have it in kind of like a verbose statement, like the user clicks here and then this and this happens, right? But very succinct, to the point, no fluff. And developers are smart. They're going to figure it out the best way to build what you want them to build. Like, you don't have to get to nitty gritty into like how they're going to do the code. Like, that's their job, but just be specific about what functionality you want. So I feel like I skipped a lot on this one over here, but I'm sure that there'll be some questions afterwards. But the next part, all right. So when it's time to launch. So with GrowthMentor, it took 1 month to do the designs. And then we flew to Poland. I had a meeting with the developers, and just spent 2 nights over there and then flew back. And then from that point on, it took 6 months to complete the MVP. And the initial quote was 3 months. And lo and behold, 2x, Maciek's prediction was correct. Took double the amount of time and 1.5 times the amount of cost, because they were kind of cool and cut me a bit of a discount there. But yeah, it takes time to build quality work. And honestly, like, if I was going to do it again, I probably wouldn't have done it like this. I took a huge ass risk by just going straight into this was much more than an MVP. It was, I like to call it, a minimum delightful product. And the reason why I kind of went all out with this, instead of starting with a no-code tool, like, you know, maybe making a type form and then having Zapier kind of push things to an Airtable and then manually match people, because there were ways that I could have built GrowthMentor without building an actual Ruby on Rails application for it. But I knew that if I was going to attract the caliber of mentors that I wanted on the platform, not that I knew, but I had this feeling like I had to deliver something that met a certain standards, because my audience are snobs. No offense, growth marketing people, but you are. So there was just the idea I had in my head that if I was going to start, I wanted it to be something that looked amazing, and was functional, and was scalable from the get-go. So in terms of launching, right? So September 4th, we launched, literally like finished it that day. The reason why I actually launched it prematurely 1 week before, because I had a call scheduled with Heaton Shah, which is, I don't know if you're familiar, but he's pretty big in the product space. And we were gonna just have a chat about one of his things that he was working on. He was doing user research. He sent an email to his newsletter, and I just really wanted to talk with him. And during that chat, also kind of show him, hey, you know, I'm working on GrowthMentor. What do you think about it? Anyway, that was a pretty cool chat. But launching the product, when you think of launch, you think like space shuttle up, promotions everywhere, product hunts, all of that. That's not the way that I think of that's not the way that I thought of a launch when I launched GrowthMentor. It was more of a shadow launch, like, let's just get something out so that I can send a link to people and have them sign up and test the process to see if there's any bugs, to see if they understand the value proposition, and just kind of like do a dry run through it. So that's the way we did it for I think 2 weeks. We had it live, and we didn't promote it anywhere. Like, nobody really knew that we existed. We were just indexed in Google. Like, we weren't doing any content marketing beforehand. And that was a strategic decision before I made, to not do content, because I didn't want people to know about GrowthMentor. Because when I launched, like, I didn't want people to have a bad first taste. And in hindsight, would I have done it that way? Probably not. I would just definitely invest a lot more in content to already build a following. But back then I was a little bit paranoid about, people seeing bugs and stuff. But I got to say one more thing about launches. So when I finally promoted it, it was in a Facebook group called SaaS Growth Hacks, and the first sort of like coming out with it was asking for feedback from a Facebook group, which had one-to-one my exact buyer persona inside of it. And I told the story of how I was ahead of growth at EuroVPS, and I was kind of struggling with indecisiveness, and I decided to build this platform. And what do you guys think? Give me some feedback. And there was like 150 comments on it, and shitloads of likes and hearts and all that good stuff. And I thought, wow, this is on. I'm gonna start getting calls from VCs any minute, and it's on. But spike down, and that was cool. It was like some firecrackers, but that's it, And my expectations were shown to be completely not realistic. And having spoken to so many founders ever since, I realized that this is a very common theme amongst founders. Like, there's no thing like this that happens and then the hordes of people come. It's just a lot of grueling hard work to get your name out there. I read this amazing quote from this guy on like Hacker News, and it was like, starting a startup is kind of like war, but instead of thousands of people trying to shoot you with machine guns, there's millions of people that are just ignoring you. And that's the perpetual sort of challenge that you have when you start a startup. Like, how can I get people to stop ignoring me? You need to, and the answer to that is to have a good product and add value to the world in one way or another. Make sure that your product works. Don't screw anybody over. Make sure that the price is reasonable in the beginning, per the value that you're offering, and just be consistent. Like, show up, and just don't be annoying as well with your marketing. There's a lot of spam out there, so try and do what the 99% don't do. And for us, what that was building human relationships, like really personal relationships, like genuine ones, with everybody that we got in contact with. Now, whether that was the mentors who would apply and then who would get through the vetting process, or even the ones that didn't get through the vetting process, then the mentees who would sign up. When we launched initially, we had like, I think 400 new users in like a month, which was for me insane. But 400 users means nothing if they're not booking any calls or not doing what they're supposed to do on your product, not engaging. And that's what happened. Like, people would sign up and there weren't any calls being booked. I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, at that point we had 25 mentors, I think, and they were really good, and they wanted to do calls and help people, but no one was booking. And what I ended up doing was adding friction to the onboarding process. So instead of allowing mentees to be able to sign up with one click, the counterintuitive thing is to add friction to the sign up process, which is exactly what we did, because we wanted to figure out who these people are and like get as much data as possible about them, because clearly like there was something wrong with the messaging. And what ended up happening is the conversion rate fell tremendously by like 80%, but the users that were signing up had to fill in this onboarding form. We would ask them a bunch of different questions about like, what's your role? What's your biggest pain point? What challenges do you have? And then after they'd fill in that onboarding form, we'd give them access to the platform, and we'd then jump on a call. And I would then send an invite for them to jump on a call where I do like a personalized onboarding and give that really human touch and try and connect with the exact mentor that I felt would be a good fit for them. And once we started doing that, then engagement started going up, and we realized that they didn't book calls because mentorship in their head was something that should be a free thing. And that gave us the idea of testing to see whether the mentors would be cool with having rates be zero. And we did a little bit of tweaking in the back end of the code, and we allowed it so that Stripe Connect would allow an integer value of 0 on the price, so that mentors could essentially offer free calls. And what happened afterwards is like 80% of the mentors just put the rate to free, because they were like, yeah, whatever, I don't mind doing it for free. I want to talk to people and see what their pain points are. And then when we had mentors doing it for free, we saw a hockey stick increase in engagement. And that insight would have never happened if we didn't talk to our users. So when you're launching, when it's those early days, you might think that you've got it figured out, like what your go-to market strategy is, but 9 out of 10 times you don't, and things are going to happen that completely surprise you. And just having those conversations with people and just doing a screen share, seeing how they use your application, there's nothing comparable to that. So the next slides is about investors, right? So as I mentioned earlier, like it was a choice of the car or the startup. The startup ultimately won, and the idea was that at some point we would start looking for investors to accelerate growth, because hell, that's what everybody does, right? You start a startup, you grow it, you get traction, and then you go for investors, and you hire a bunch of people, you get an office, and then you get acquired by Google. But thing is that that's the stereotypical sort of cookie cutter image that's out there in popular media, but it doesn't always have to be that way. And it really, like for us, like it turned out to be something that we kind of got disheartened with after going to San Francisco and exhibiting at Startup Grind. So in around 6 months after we launched, we went to San Francisco to exhibit at Startup Grind conference, and there we saw hundreds of different startups. We had our booth just like everybody else, and the reason we went was because we wanted to network and also kind of sell GrowthMentor memberships, because at the end of the day, there's a one-to-one product market fit between the people over there, these founders, and what we had to offer. And it was a lot of opportunities for talking to people, user research, and so on. But what we ended up noticing is that everybody was there for funding. They were looking for investment, and walking around the booths and talking to these people, like I put my investor hat on, like as if I was an investor, like what would I think? And I wouldn't have invested in like 90% of them. They were like, for me, non-fundable, like barely any product market, like very little traction, some of them. And just like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you back home working, improving your product? And instead you're chasing funding. So like, it really gave me a lot of food for thought after seeing that rat race in SF. And I went back and I'm like, all right, we just spent 10 grand flying the entire team over there. Like, let's just focus now and do what we can do to grow the company ourselves, right? And then like, if we hit a point where if we don't have funding, we might close, then we'll consider it. But for me, that's pretty much one of the telltale signs that you should get funding. Like if you don't get it, you're probably going to close. Now, either your burn rate is way too high and you're going to run out of your own personal runway, then yeah, probably it's a good idea to investigate getting funding. But VCs are probably the last sort of resort. It was actually not even a last resort. Like they shouldn't even enter into the conversation if you're early stage, like super early stage, because VCs, they just want they're looking for companies that have like incredible traction. Like I've had calls from VCs who contacted me cold. This is like in the more recent months, because GrowthMentor has, it's just a little bit more on social media now, and people think that we're much bigger than we really are financially. So like they'll contact me and they'll be like, hey, GrowthMentor sounds awesome, blah, blah. And first question they ask, so it's like, all right, have you hit the $1 million mark, ARR? And this has happened 3 times. The same question, have you hit 1 million? I'm like, no, I haven't. Thanks, but I don't know. Like, do you have any other questions, like about us, about the company? And it's like, all right, what are your other KPIs? It's just purely number driven. So that's probably not a really cool place to look for if you're early stage. Friends and family, I would definitely recommend hitting up that first, especially if you have some traction and you can show that, look, like I'm not going to lose your money. Don't go and try and raise money from friends and family if you're probably not going to make it, and deep down inside whether that's the case. You're in the reds. No one cares about your product. You haven't sold $1 in the last 2 months. Like if that's the case, just keep trying to bootstrap it and hustle. I mean, there's that. The other alternative, which we've done, is just really try to upskill ourselves in everything that we can. So we had this mentality like, all right, if we did have funding, like who would we hire? Okay, I'd hire somebody for email marketing. I'd hire somebody for PPC. I'd hire somebody for product management. Great. Those are 3 roles. They'll cost $4,000 a month if I hire somebody. How can I get to that point where I can be at the elite status and do it myself and save that money? Yes, that's extremely stressful and it's a heavy load to carry. But in these early days, when you don't really have that money and you know that you've got a lot of work to do, and the product roadmap is crystal clear, there is some semblance of traction. I mean, I think it's completely reasonable to just to push to the limit, and your limits are a lot further than what you think, and that's in the physical sense, in the emotional sense, and our capacity for growth is tremendous, and our capacity for learning as well is tremendous. And whenever I don't know something, I feel like I need to get better at something, like I'll jump on a call with somebody who's better than me at it, and just show them what I'm doing and ask for their advice. Like, what am I screwing up at? Like, how can I hack my learning curve? So that's essentially my alternative to raising funding. Just be at the elite level and do it myself. But yeah, ultimately what investors want to hear is, I don't need you. I'm profitable. I'm making a lot of money. And like, if you want to invest, cool. If you don't, like, that's cool as well. That they love that. So get to that point as soon as possible, and then it's just going to be a breeze to get investors. I mean, you can even cold email them afterwards, and yeah, I mean, they're like cats. They like play the hard to get thing, but when they want something, they'll go for it. And I think that's the end of the presentation. Just the one last slide. I'm going to end it with one of my favorite quotes by Mark Twain. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones you did do. Just think about that. For me, that was my sort of like big driving force behind starting GrowthMentor and taking this risk. So I just wouldn't be able to live with myself like further down the line if I didn't do it, didn't take that risk. So if you also feel like that strongly, like, oh my God, if I don't do this, how will I be able to kind of live with myself down the line? Like, then, just go for it, go all in.